Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and it is such a delight to be back with you. And can you believe we're coming very close to finishing the very first month of 2017. We've got a brand new president now in the name of Donald John Trump, and time is really flying by. Today's feature, if you saw in the headlines, it talked about how the corruption of two district attorneys, namely Scott Perrilloux of Livingston Parish and Earl Taylor of St. Landry Parish, is endangering the lives of all of us as motorists. And let me just say that I got the foundation for this particular production that we're doing here today, this sound-off feature. It originally emanated from a post in a blog done by investigative journalist Tom Aswell. He made that post on December the 5th of 2016. It involved a young man named Cody Boland, and it provided a chronological listing of all of the problematic situations Mr. Boland has managed to get himself into. But you know, the printed page is nice, and just seeing a listing is great. And Mr. Aswell really focused on how Papaw, who happens to be Marvin Henderson, likely exerted some influence to assist his grandson Cody Boland in those particular situations. What I want to do is I want to use this video to kind of let those individual line items that Mr. Aswell did. We're only going to do the major ones. If I stood here and did seat belts and speeding tickets, we'd be here for hours. So we're only going to do the major ones, but trust me, there are plenty of those. And so I want to do it in reverse chronological order. And so what we're going to do is we're going to begin with the final one that is listed on Mr. Aswell's site. And I'll pull that one first because you click on it. It's the first link. That is a report from the Baton Rouge Police Department. Here is the actual report. And let's just go over what transpired in that incident, because that incident, oddly enough, Mr. Boland will be facing court in Baton Rouge City Court on Monday, January the 30th at 9 a.m. We will be there, and we will do a follow-up video. We will add a video to this page to let you know how that turns out. That's assuming Mr. Boland shows up, because as we go through these, you will see he quite frequently does not. However, let's read what the officer had to say. It says on September 21st, 2016 at 5:09 hours, that would be 5:09 a.m. in the morning, he was dispatched to the 1300 block of Scenic Highway. Now, many of you may not be familiar with Baton Rouge, but if you are, you will know that that is an area that you're quite likely going to have a prevalence of drugs. It's a simple matter of fact. Let's continue reading what he said. He said, note, this vehicle was a BOLO. Those of you who may not know that acronym, that's be on the lookout for. This vehicle was a BOLO vehicle by dispatch earlier on the present date. An anonymous complainant advised that a black Jeep with license plates number FPN 164 was swerving from lane to lane going 40 miles per hour. Going 40 miles per hour on the interstate is itself illegal because the minimum is 45. His next paragraph, a second anonymous complaint advised that a vehicle was hitting the walls on the interstate and that the vehicle is now at the Circle K gas station. The caller advised that the vehicle was a black Jeep with Nova Scotia license plate. Upon arrival, I encountered the operator of the vehicle, who was Cody Boland. Now, Mr. Boland couldn't be charged with the DWI or driving under the influence. By the way, Mr. Boland does not drink. His problem is drugs, okay? But he could not be charged for impaired driving in this instance because Mr. Boland was smart enough to get out of the vehicle and be in the rear seat at the time that the police arrived. But as you can tell, this is pretty serious infractions. You've got two motorists who have called in and said, hey, look, we got a dangerous guy out here on the road swerving from lane to lane at 40 miles an hour in the interstate. Another one calls in and says he's crashing into walls on the interstate. So that'll add a little bit of life to that particular entry. And as I said, we will be in court on the 30th of January, which is Monday coming up, at 9 a.m. in Judge Ponder's courtroom to see how this matter may be dealt with. That is assuming that he shows up. Now, let's move on to the second incident. That occurred only 3 months prior, and that was on June the 22nd. of 2016, June the 22nd of 2016, and that one's going to be quite interesting because that goes directly to the corruption that I am referencing for District Attorney Earl Taylor in St. Landry Parish. Now, you can click on the link. Once again, we're talking about Cody Boland. It says on June the 11th, 2016, at approximately 13:15 hours, that would be 1:15 p.m., I was notified by LSP1 that they received a call from a concerned citizen who was traveling north on I-49 at about the mile marker 4. The caller stated that he was observing a white Ford F-150 with no license plate, traveling very fast and making numerous lane changes without any regard for other vehicles on the roadway. At approximately 13:22, I observed the vehicle in question pass my location and make 2 lane changes without using a signal. I initiated my lights and sirens to conduct a traffic stop. Note, it took almost 1.5 miles for the vehicle to finally pull over in the eastbound shoulder. Note, Cody Boland, the driver was identified as Mr. Cody Matthew Boland. Note, Mr. Boland was very nervous. Boland could not produce or provide any proof of insurance, and the vehicle showed that it is not on the Think Stream system. I asked him about searching his vehicle. He said, and I quote, "My lawyer told me never to allow someone to search my vehicle." I informed Boland that his vehicle was getting towed due to it not being insured. I also requested a K-9 unit. K-9 unit came out, that being the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office. Brandon Dugas of the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office arrived with his K-9 Dino. You can refer to the dog's report. You can refer to Deputy Dugas's report. We've got that for you. The bottom line, the dog sniffed around and he uncovered the presence of drugs. The officer who called in for backup had already said he smelled the strong odor of marijuana, but I want to emphasize they found a Suboxone tablet, okay? Now, I was not familiar with what Suboxone is prior to me doing any research on this. Suboxone is basically liquid, pill form heroin. It is in minimal doses in an attempt to try to wean someone off of heroin. But I want to emphasize it was tablet, it was not film. So there were 3 issues that Mr. Boland was charged with in that little incident. Number 1 was a careless operation. Number 2, not having insurance. And not having a prescription for the aforementioned Suboxone tablet. Now, with regard to the not having insurance, well, let's take a look at how that got resolved. You're going to have a link. Well, it's not a link. It's within the documentation that we provided to you. And I'm putting it up very close to the camera. Less than a week later, the St. Landry Parish DA's office gets faxed in this little proof of insurance that was taken out in the name of Marvin Henderson, and it just so coincidentally happens that the date of inception of the policy was 1 day prior to the accident. Now, it was backdated very clearly, but I guess in the corrupt St. Landry District Attorney's Office, this in their mind absolves Mr. Boland of not having insurance. Never mind that had he crashed into somebody on that day, he would have had no insurance. All right, but apparently when you've got a corrupt District Attorney's Office, that doesn't really matter. Now, I want to move on to the next thing because this one is critical. The next page of that document, you will, I made a public records request. Well, first of all, I called St. Landry Parish because I figured, hey, I can show up for this court hearing and see how this turns out. Because I called literally within about, I don't know, 60 days of this having happened. They told me that the charges had already been dismissed. And I thought it was a joke. But they were not joking, and so I made a public record. They said he had completed the DA diversion program, also known as pretrial intervention. Now, first of all, I want to emphasize that is a program that you are only eligible for 1 time, okay? As we proceed on this, you're going to see Mr. Boland has allegedly been through PTI many times. Secondly, there's an age limit on it. There again, when you're running a corrupt district attorney's office, I guess none of that matters. So I made a public records request to see the dates, the times, all the evidence of Mr. Boland having so-called completed this DA diversion program. And I want to emphasize, they said he did it in 11 days, all right? He was arrested on June the 11th of 2016, and this is all I got. I'm going to put it right up here in front of the camera, right there. This is all I got. I have it highlighted there. I want you to get a good look. It's on that link. But you can see that it says, PTI completed, dismiss the charges, and there's someone's initials down there. Now, I visited with Miss Donna for getting these public records, and I asked her whose initials those were. And she told me she didn't know, okay? Well, first of all, let me emphasize, they were going to blow me off. I wasn't getting return phone calls, but when I showed up, it was a little bit more difficult to blow me off. She told me that the investigator who would be responsible for having looked into this case was a gentleman named Barry Swallow. Barry Swallow. Well, if you look at those initials right at the end that says dismiss, and I would imagine Barry is his middle name, boy, does that second letter sure does look like a B, and the last letter sure does look like an S, doesn't it? And so as I left that DA's office, I mean, it couldn't have been 5 minutes before I saw a phone call come in, and I was on a very important call. I couldn't take it, so it went to voicemail. And it was none other than Mr. Barry Swallow. Now, he had to leave me a voicemail, and I'm going to play it for you at this time. And I'm going to emphasize that he gave me a number to call back. We're going to put it on the screen. The number he gave me to call back is 337-457-5389. 337-457-5339. Now let's play the message that Mr. Swallow left for me.
Mr. Burns, this is Barry Swallow. I'm the Darrell Taylor investigator for the District Attorney's Office. Can you please return my call? I'm at the Eunice office, 337-457-5339. Thank you.
Now, I will tell you that I called Mr. Swallow back no less than a dozen times. Never once was there ability to leave a voice message, and certainly I never got a call back from him. I want to encourage the viewers. We're going to put that number on the screen, 337-457-5389, and any one of you can ask him the same question I was going to do. Did he complete this program or not? Okay? And if he didn't, why'd you say that he did? All right. Now, they went ahead and, based on Mr. Swallow's presumed representation, because I assume that's his initials, they did go ahead and drop the charges. They showed up in court. Mr. Boland was never there. In fact, I don't even believe an attorney was there. Everything was all set up by remote control. All right? And it was stated in open court before a judge that this man has completed the pretrial intervention or DA diversion program, whichever you want to refer to it. They're both one and the same. But so you see how they're getting rid of all these problems. The insurance, it's been backdated. So we get this ID card. Now, I want to also emphasize, if you look at the next couple of pages on there, we still got the problem about the Suboxone, okay, and the tablet. How are we going to get that to go away? Well, gee, Mr. Boland, you think you said you got a prescription for that? You think you could fax in a photo of your prescription and take a look at the bottle? All right. Number one, it has the wrong address on there. He no longer lives at that address. Number two, there's no date on the prescription. But most importantly, and you can see it in bold letters, it says film. Yet Mr. Boland was caught with a tablet. That is not the prescription that would enable this man to have that tablet. These are the types of things, as I told many of you, I was a fraud investigator for 6 years with the FDIC. These are the types of discrepancies that you point out when you are looking into fraud. But when you've got a corrupt district attorney who is hell-bent on doing this kind of corruption, naturally they don't see it because they don't give a damn. It was all an effort to clear all this thing as a favor to somebody. Maybe it was Papaw. I don't know. I just know that in 11 days, this rocket scientist allegedly completed, God only knows how many pretrial interventions, because you're going to see some more as we go along. It's only supposed to be one time. All right. But the important thing is they did have evidence in the file that he had remitted the $677. In fact, it was a Western Union money order, maybe even in the documentation I've given you. And I guess that's what's important. The money. Never mind the public safety of the people. Never mind the lesson you're sending this young man and the horrible message it sends to the public. that a law enforcement officer does his job, Dino, the dog, does his job, only for a corrupt district attorney to negate all of those efforts, all right? And we're going to give you a link for an advocate article in which the sheriff of St. Landry Parish expressed frustration with District Attorney Earl Taylor over this very matter and his rampant abuses of the pretrial intervention or DA diversion program with regard to drug offenders. So clearly this is not an isolated incident, but I wanted to bring it to light and let you see the danger that this man is placing all of our lives in by doing this sort of thing. All right, let's proceed on to the next one. That one was probably earth-shattering enough. Let's proceed on to the next one. On October 27th of 2015, so roll the clock back another 6 months. Here we have Mr. Boland having been arrested for possession of drugs and drug paraphernalia. By the way, the paraphernalia in the Baton Rouge City Police was a glass pipe for smoking this stuff. But here we have the infamous Scott Perrilloux, whom I've already told you I believe is the most corrupt district attorney in this entire state. So when Mr. Boland came up for charges on that, and it'll be the link that we gave you, Mr. Perrilloux just exercised his authority by way of Code of Civil Procedure 691, which we have a link for you to see, and he said, I ain't prosecuting, I'm dropping the charges. All right, so there we have Mr. Boland skating once again. All right, let's roll on back. We're going back in time now. So now we were at October the 25th. Let's go back to April the 4th of 2015. Yes, we've got yet another incident. In this particular occasion, we had a stopped school bus that was unloading children from their day's school. I guess Mr. Boland doesn't have time for such foolishness. He's not about to sit behind a stopped school bus, and so he just gets over in the left-hand lane, plows right through it, even as they're unloading school children. Let's read what the bus driver says. I put on my warning lights. I stopped the bus. I put out the stop arms. I opened the door. The truck passed me by while the arms were out. And guess what? The crooked, corrupt Scott Perrilloux once again exercised Code of Criminal Procedure 691 and dismissed the charges. Wow. Now that's showing a hell of a lot of concern for young children. But I guess when you're that corrupt, that's what you do. Because somebody wanted them dropped. So he got them dropped. Now I'm going to take just a moment to do a little bit of a tangent here. Let's go on the theory that Mr. Aswell's assumption is right, that Papaw has exerted some influence. And I would think in Livingston Parish that's probably a pretty good assumption. I'm going to briefly have as an aside, Miss Edmonds took it upon herself not long back when a complaint came in about Marvin Henderson and they first said they had consulted with me. She took the time to, number one, say I was a nutcase and use some other at least according to him, some other unflattering remarks about me, but at the same time had the highest level of adoration and praise for Marvin Henderson. Well, let me ask you this, Miss Edmonds. I believe your oldest son, maybe your only son, I don't know, I believe his name is Hayden. If it was Hayden getting off that school bus and Cody Boland plowed into him, and you're called out to see your dead son looking at you, and this kind of thing happened because of the influence of the gentleman you referenced, Marvin Henderson, would you have such high praise and adoration for him then? It's a simple question. If it was your son who was victimized by this kind of foolishness, by this kind of corruption, and your life forever changed, would you have that high level of praise and adoration for him then? All right, so that's the April the 4th of 2015 incident. Let's proceed on. About 30 days prior to that, Mr. Boland was traveling on US 190. In fact, the date I believe was March I had to list these things off because there's so damn many of them, it's unfathomable. March the 17th of 2015, less than 30 days prior to him having ran right by a school bus. Mr. Boland was traveling east on US 190. There was a traffic light. Mr. Boland apparently gets impatient when he's under the influence of these drugs. And so he, at some point, the light had never changed green, but he decided he was ready to go on anyway, and he plowed right into the motorist in front of him. Again, that incident was on March the 17th of 2015. Here is the report from the state trooper who was called out to assist Albany police. I want to read a few sections of that. On March the 17th, 2015, I was dispatched, I being Michelle Pat, she is the state trooper who was called in for assistance. On March the 17th of 2015 at approximately 19:04, that would be 7:04 p.m., she was dispatched out to this scene. The Albany police was already there on site. The driver of one vehicle was identified as a Cody Matthew Boland. He advised that his foot had slipped off the brakes and rolled into the back of vehicle number 2. While talking with Boland, I noticed he had slurred speech and foam in both corners of his mouth. The driver also kept repeating himself multiple times. After completing, she asked him to take a field sobriety test, and he was stumbling around trying to do so, and she says, after completing the first 9 steps, he stopped, at which time I had to remind him to walk back 9 steps. On one leg, with one leg stand, he raised his right foot, at which time he swayed while balancing and put his foot down on 10:06 and 10:07. He asked to start over, at which time he swayed while balancing his foot down again on 10:16, at which time he stopped the test himself. I guess it had been enough embarrassment for one little episode. At 7:41 p.m., it says 1941, but I'm just giving you the time. The driver 1, that would be Mr. Boland, was placed under arrest for DWI. The driver of vehicle number 2 stated that he was stopped on US 190 westbound on LA 43. I'm sorry, previously I said eastbound, it should be westbound. Driver 2 stated that while he was stopped at the red light, vehicle number 1 accelerated and ran into the back of his rear bumper. Boland was transported to the Livingston Parish Jail, where I read him his rights. Boland was charged with LRS 14:98, second offense DWI, and LRS 3258, careless operation. All right. That was the hearing that Mr. Aswell was profiling, and for which the trial was December 5th or 6th. It was the next day after Mr. Aswell's post. Tom has a unique flavor for putting things out very timely, leading right up to a big event. So I attended that particular court hearing, and the arresting officer, trooper, get them confused, sheriff's deputy, trooper, and I know you're supposed to keep them straight, so I don't want to mess it up. Trooper Pat conveniently was not there, and therefore he was allowed to plead no contest to just reckless operation. Wow. Trooper Pat also was not subpoenaed. Now, she was subpoenaed for a previous court hearing. She was subpoenaed for that, but District Attorney Scott Perrilloux, with the full knowledge that there was going to be a Mothers Against Drunk Driver representative there, because they're getting fed up with this kind of stuff, okay? He conveniently didn't subpoena Trooper Pat. Now, I called Trooper Pat, left 3 or 4 messages, and she was not subpoenaed. She should have been subpoenaed. I will just point out I never got the courtesy of a returned phone call. Not very. So in other words, Trooper Pat and Barry Swallow have a lot in common. Either don't answer the phone or they don't return messages left for them. If nothing's going on here, it looked like you'd be more than happy to talk about it. The reality is there's plenty going on here. You damn well know it. And now it's getting exposed, and everybody wants to suddenly be quiet, quiet, and hush, hush. All right. Let's proceed on to another. I know you're saying, how many more can there be? Well, I've only got 2 more. But we need to proceed on. Let's talk about an incident on September 6, 2012. Now, we did have to go back a couple of years. So who knows, maybe he was on the straight and narrow. He's really off the wagon right now, because these things are coming in so fast, nobody can even track them. Okay? But on September the 6th of 2012, in French Settlement, Louisiana, Mr. Boland was involved in a head-on collision. Those are typically pretty dangerous. And in fact, both had to be taken to the hospital. Now, we got you the link for what all happened on that one. Let's read a few of the highlights there. On September 6, 2012, I, Trooper Huey McCartney, I believe it is, I drove up to a head-on crash in French Settlement at 17:15 hours. That would be 5:15. The chief of police of French Settlement was already on the scene working the crash. Vehicle 1, the driver of Vehicle 1, that would be Cody Boland, was, quote, obviously impaired. He seemed unsteady, and his speech was slurry. He kept confusing his words. I asked him to count from 45 to 30. By the way, that is a technique that you are supposed to do in auction school, so Mr. Boland, since he's in the auction profession, ought to be pretty good at it. Plus, I would figure any kind of ordinary citizen ought to be able to count backwards from 45 to 30. But let's read how Mr. Boland responded. Oh, he said, I can do that. I can do such. He counted 45, 49, 47, 38, 41, 44, 33, 30. I don't know what auction school they taught that sequence in to any other auctioneer. They damn sure didn't teach it at Continental Auctioneer School where I went. So that was Mr. Boland counting backwards from 45 to 30. He said that he, quote, fell asleep, and that's what caused the crash. I impounded the subject vehicle, gave the license number, driver, Cody Boland. Both drivers were taken to St. Elizabeth Hospital. The driver of Vehicle 1 was read his rights and his blood was drawn. Now it's not going to show alcohol. It never will. He does not drink. After they treated him, I, Chief Brignac, transported him to the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office where he was booked into jail for DWI and improper lane usage. There's a supplemental little report here. The driver of Vehicle 2, that would be the victim who suddenly gets ran into head-on this roadway. The driver of Vehicle 2 told me that the vehicle just came over into his lane and hit me head-on. The EMTs with French Settlement Fire Department was trying to work on Mr. Boland, and he was giving them a problem about going to the hospital. Acadian arrived, and he did the same thing with them as with the French Settlement EMTs. So I went over to Acadian and told them he was advised of his rights at 5:38 p.m. and he was under arrest, to take him to Elizabeth Hospital. So they took Mr. Boland and the driver of Vehicle 2 to the hospital. So then I, Chief Brignac, and Trooper McCartney followed Acadian to the hospital to draw blood and urine from Mr. Boland. All right, and we got one more, and then that will wrap it up. Drugs cost money. All right, sometimes money may be a little hard to get, particularly if Papa and I may not be in the most generous mood. So then we have a May the 3rd, 2011 incident in Ascension Parish, wherein Mr. Boland was arrested for theft by shoplifting. Now, as you go through these dates, I'm not going to read them all out. Numerous times he fails to show up for court, but then all of a sudden on August the 6th, 2012, we find that he allegedly completed yet another pretrial intervention program. It's obvious that these pretrial intervention programs perform miracles. Once you've completed it, nothing else bad is going to happen. They must be incredibly effective. Now, we talked about Cody Boland, him being the grandson of Marvin Henderson. I want to emphasize something. We're going to give you the link for Cody Boland's National Auctioneers Association membership. Now, this is an entity that is supposed to take pride in its ethics, National Auctioneers Association. You've already seen prominent member Marvin Henderson. He's in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to go into the details of everything we have presented on the Sound Off website, but we're talking about a felony conviction for mail fraud. We're talking about not paying state income taxes, tax liens. We're talking about fraudulent wire transfers wherein $1 million went out the window. Most recently, we had a federal judge basically point blank say, Marvin Henderson, you committed fraud here. And then we have the illegal notarizations that Mr. Henderson has been engaging in. And this is supposed to be an organization that touts its ethics. Next, we have Mr. Keith Babb. And by the way, I do appreciate some of the individual. Thank you for the comments that were made with regard to the feature on Keith Babb in our last episode. But there were a few that sent me privately taking particular umbrage with Keith Babb when he referenced Mr. Henson and talked about him having been dead for 3 years. And he said that I was, quote, whipping a dead horse, unquote. I would agree with you. That is disrespectful of the dead for certain, particularly one who filed a complaint against Mr. Babb, and particularly one that Mr. Babb threatened by saying, you better not come up there and you want to have a hearing on me before the LALB. You're going to get hit with the court costs. How much money you want to spend on all this? Again, there's another Hall of Fame member, okay, in the National Auctioneers Association. And of course now you've seen Cody Boland. Those are 3 just from Louisiana, all right? But I want to emphasize something else. Mr. Boland was one of the most prominent ones. I told you we're going to give you subsequent features about who all called for Freddie Phillips as his head. Mr. Boland was one of the prominent, he was right there in the midst. So we got a drug addict bending the governor's ear for who ought to be on the Auctioneers Licensing Board. And Honor Code says, oh, you're right. He got to go. Wow. Folks, the material I have submitted to you is serious. And I don't know, I don't guess I'm being flippant here, but maybe Mr. Boland was granted such latitude. Perhaps he was a good customer for this secondhand drug trade that the FBI is investigating and for which they seized the laptop of Sheriff Daniel Edwards in Tangipahoa Parish. Just a thought. Maybe it wasn't Papo after all. But what I'm getting at is the incredible level of rank corruption that is within John Bell Edwards' administration. And you're seeing further and further evidence of it, and trust me, we got more to come. I hope everyone's remainder of your month goes well. It's hard to believe that we are this far into 2017 already. We will be in attendance at that January 30th hearing in Judge Susan Ponder's courtroom. We'll do a subsequent video if Mr. Boland shows up. It's doubtful that he will, because they don't show up unless everything has been preset and taken care of beforehand. So I hope you've enjoyed this feature. It is somewhat nauseating, but it's my job to report to you what's going on in this state, not to try to get out here and try, woo, we got some of the greatest auctioneers in the world. And that's what I'm going to do. And the chips will fall where they may, not only for that corruption, but more corruption in other areas that we'll be reporting to you soon. Once again, this is Robert Burns thanking you for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you our next episode. Thank you so much.